10:23 here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. Boy, what an interesting week this week for the CAA. Tom Yeager, the head of the conference, has certainly got his work cut out for him moving forward. On Tuesday, VCU made it official, bolting for the Atlantic 10. And just a couple of days later, Old Dominion followed suit and did what was rumored to do and leave the CAA, or announce its intentions to leave the CAA to join Conference USA. Now, both of these schools are leaving the CAA for very different reasons. And for Tom, one of them, I think there's nothing he could do about it. Hey, it is what it is. The other one, though, if I'm him, I'm disappointed about. Again, as mentioned, these two completely different reasons for leaving. VCU, obviously, VCU doesn't have football, so the intent is for basketball. It's been often speculated about VCU going to the Atlantic 10. Of course, George Mason was supposed to be in that mix, too. And it came down that the Atlantic 10 was only seeking one new member in addition to Butler. So VCU got the nod over George Mason. George Mason came out as a preemptive strike and said, hey, we're not going, we're staying in the CAA. Well, probably can read between the lines after the announcement why they did that. But the big thing with the A10 is the fact that historically the Atlantic 10 has gotten more bids to the NCAA tournament. So VCU looking at it saying, hey, we had the best season in school history, and if we wouldn't have won our conference tournament, we may have not went to the NCAA tournament, where in theory they should have beat Indiana. So for VCU, obviously, this makes the NCAA tournament more accessible, at least historically. So that's why the Rams are leaving. Now, for ODU, completely different. Of course, the Monarchs have football now, and their goals are set on bolstering that football program. And like so many FCS schools, similar to Georgia State, for instance, wanting to get to the FBS level as a football program. Now, I'm going to continue to maintain I don't quite understand that completely. I mean, I get the revenue and the notoriety that comes with being like D1 and top-tier football and the increased scholarships for, football players and that sort of thing. I get all that. But what I don't quite understand is if you're in Conference USA, if you're in the Sun Belt Conference, you are never going to play for a championship. You're just not. So I still don't quite understand that one, but hey, I guess the revenue is there, and obviously the notoriety from being major college football is there, the TV exposure, it's worth it at that time. If you're going FCS to that level, it's worth it. I can see where they can make that argument. Now, for Tom, I don't think he could do anything about the ODU situation. ODU wanted to play major D1 college football. They wanted to be in a major D1 college football conference, which technically Conference USA is. So if you're the CAA, there's nothing you can do about that. There is nothing you can do to stop ODU from joining that conference. I would rather play for a championship, but if the money is out of the table, okay. Now, for VCU, completely different story. And again, I get the numbers and the historical breakdown. It's been pretty overwhelming in favor of the A10. But at the same time, for VCU and where this program is at right now, the goals and the expectations aren't just to make it to the tournament year in and year out. It's now to win tournament games. I mean, they just went to the Final Four. And you can ask George Mason. The goals and the expectations at Mason have been different ever since that school's Final Four run back in 2006. It's different now. When Mason doesn't make the tournament, people aren't exactly thrilled about it up in Fairfax. For VCU, same thing. And, the one thing they obviously can't count on is how long Shaka Smart will be running things there. And you never know year in and year out. Injuries, and you're banking on kids, especially when you turn over classes, you're banking on kids coming in and filling roles that sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't. So there is some volatility, obviously, in college basketball. But in my mind, the way I always saw it, there was no reason why VCU couldn't perennially be in the national discussion year in and year out in terms of being an NCAA tournament qualifier, especially with the expanded field. Because the one thing now that VCU has done for itself is the name recognition. And we talked about this during the CAA tournament. Mason and VCU, brand names. VCU, obviously, the hotter of the two because of the Final Four run and then the performance in the tournament this past year, knocking off Wichita State and then almost taking care of Indiana, a game that VCU should have won, which had been huge for the Rams. So VCU, in my opinion, didn't need to do much in the CAA in order to make it to the tournament. I didn't think the VCU needed to win the conference year in, year out. Now, certainly there's evidence that it was not good enough for Drexel. The Dragons won the regular season title, lost in the tournament, and didn't get in. But I think VCU is different now. I don't think that they needed to rely on being in the top 4 of their conference in order to get in. I think VCU's goal right away in the A-10 should be to win the whole thing. I mean, coming off the year that they had with the team they've got coming back, they should be able to win the whole thing. And I know you could say, well, hold up right there. I mean, the A-10 does have some pretty stiff competition, yada, yada, yada. But look, VCU, in my opinion, should be favored to win the thing. What they were able to accomplish last year, and to be able to build upon that, I mean, they should have breezed through the CAA, which the other surprise of this whole thing, out July 1st, just cold turkey, just gone. I think that was one of the biggest surprises out of this announcement, but I didn't think VCU needed to change conferences in order to have an opportunity to get to the NCAA tournament. I understand it makes it easier moving forward, and you can't count on the Rams having the kind of success they've had. But again, in college basketball as opposed to college football, there's an opportunity for smaller schools, quote-unquote mid-major schools, to have a chance to play in the tournament, to go play for a championship. Butler did it in the Horizon League. Gonzaga continually in the tournament, playing out in the West Coast Conference. St. Mary's has gotten to that level. I mean, so you've got these schools that profile similar to a VCU. And they've been able to do it. And it's not that people see their conferences as being that phenomenal. But it's just the fact that they've had that kind of success and sustained success. And I think VCU's on the verge of that. Now, the one thing I will say, certainly in defense of the Rams, is the fact that by joining the A-10, that they have taken a big step in terms of marketing the university to a broader audience. You get into some different areas and some different cities through the Northeast, and then now stretching out to the Midwest and going to Indianapolis with Butler. So for VCU from a marketing standpoint, I think it certainly is a positive. From a revenue standpoint, it can be a positive if the Rams continue to have success. But at the end of the day, and even with VCU and ODU, the one thing that I think is the most unfortunate is the fact that you're going to lose some of these rivalries that have been just tremendous. And I know that they can still schedule each other, but it's not going to be the same. You know, VCU ODU is not going to be the same, and that was just a tremendous rivalry in basketball. You know, VCU Mason. Well, maybe Mason comes into the A-10 later. Who knows? We'll see. But, you know, VCU JMU and ODU JMU and, you know, ODU William and Mary. And, you know, it just goes on and on and on. And you know, those games are always so accessible to the fan base, and it's just not going to be the case anymore. I mean, how many ODU fans are going to travel to see the Monarchs play down in North Texas? I can tell you this, it's not going to be as easy for them to get to that game as it was to get to the game in Harrisonburg against JMU. I think that's the unfortunate thing, and I get it. Money is the driving force. TV revenue is the driving force. The payouts from potentially getting to a bowl game, the driving force. I understand all that, but it's coming at the cost of some historic regional rivalries and even some that have just been great as of late. To lose that, I think it's sad. Again, I grew up in Texas with the old Southwest Conference. I get it. I understand why the Southwest Conference broke up. The University of Texas is not weeping over that by any means. But it was always fun to see those regional rivalries, to have the accessibility to go to those games, home and away, and to have the house divided scenario where you've got families that have attended both schools and are on opposite sides. And, even these kids that have grown up competing against each other, to have the opportunity to do that at the collegiate level. I mean, there's just more to it, which unfortunately is going to go away. But money's been the driving force. For ODU, again, I understand. Want to play at a higher echelon of football. Nothing the CAA can do about that. For VCU, I didn't think it was necessary, but time will tell. Tom Yeager certainly has a busy summer ahead as he tries to fill in the blanks now left in the CAA. When we come back here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman, Chris Donovan from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries participating in a unique tournament today. Chris, inspired by David Dudley. We'll tell you about that when we come back here on the weekend.
The Weekend with Anthony Opperman continues next on Sports Radio 910.